I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar entitled NuGenesis LMS, a guide to innovative benefits and proven tactics for conquering lab challenges. Today's session is presented by Asterix, and your speaker will be Marcelo Suarez, who I will introduce in just a moment. And Marcelo, we can go to the next slide, please. Before we get into the actual content today, I do want to take a few minutes and just introduce you to Asterix. If this is your first webinar with us, we welcome you. If you're coming back again, we thank you for returning. A little bit about us as a company. Who is Asterix? So you can go back one sec, Marcelo. So in terms of who is Asterix, we're a consulting firm at the end of the day. We do technology and strategy consulting in life sciences, and we've been doing that now since 1995. We work with a lot of different technologies like NuGenesis and many others. However, we remain vendor and platform agnostic, meaning we spend our time making sure that we're picking the right solution or solutions to help our clients move forward. We're not just picking software because we get a kickback from them. We don't operate that way. We do operate in locations in the United States and several overseas with 1,200 employees, 90% of which hold advanced science degrees, which is something we're very proud of. Our headquarters are in beautiful Red Bank, New Jersey, and we help companies pretty much from the startup to the Fortune 1000. Predominantly, we're dealing with life science companies, chemical CPG, government agencies, research institutions. Most of the time, if you have some form of a laboratory or R&D effort, you're a company that we can help. And we can go to the next slide. And the ways in which we help, again, we offer a full service spectrum. We support the continuum of scientific operations and data management in companies. This begins with everything from helping you figure out what does your strategic innovation and roadmap look like? What does your enterprise architecture look like? And the data management and governance initiatives that you may have in your organization. This can also include a full business analysis where we help select the right technology, put the right people and processes in place to move you forward. From there, we can help you choose the right technologies, as I mentioned. We can even help with the development, design, and implementation of those, and even help you manage those applications after the fact. One of the things that makes us very unique is that we also blend in scientific and technical staffing under the same roof. So if you need scientific personnel or technical personnel, we're able to help staff those for you. So that's just a little bit about Asterix. Again, we're glad to have you. I encourage you to ask questions as you go through the session today and to check out our YouTube channel, which you will get an email about within a few days following this. So let's take a moment and introduce our speaker for today. Marcelo is someone who I'm always thrilled to have on. I've done quite a few webinars with Marcelo, and I'm always excited to do them because his presentation and content is always great. He's a delivery manager here for the Laboratory Informatics Services at Asterix and brings over 18 years of experience as a customer-facing consultant in the global life science and biotech industries. He's been with Asterix for the last 8 years as delivery manager for a couple of different practices. They include Waters NuGenesis and Empower. So, Marcelo, I'll put it in your capable hands and sit back with the audience and enjoy the presentation. I'll be back on at the end.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So for today's agenda, thanks everybody for joining the call to begin with, right? So for the meeting agenda here, we have the Asterix overview and speaker information, which we just saw, followed by introduction on the subject that we're going to be discussing, the benefits of using the NuGenesis LMS as a lab management system, followed by a quick comparison between the NuGenesis and a traditional LIMS system. What are the integration capabilities for NuGenesis, and a case study discussion for you guys. So starting by the introductions. So there is a thing that is common for every laboratory, the struggle that every laboratory has to deal with on their daily basis, right? So, for example, managing samples and just workloads within the lab. Every laboratory out there has this type of struggle. Other struggles that laboratories have is address the paper-based workloads. Some laboratories are more advanced in terms of becoming paperless. Some laboratories still use paper-based notebooks or paper-based processes, which drags a little bit the performance of the lab. And also another struggle from a typical lab is the challenge to increase throughput with targeted investments. Of course, you can add informatics platforms to do this, but you need to choose it wisely in a manner that you can spend your money on the platform that will get the most you need with the right amount of investment done over this, right? So to address these struggles from from the typical laboratory. Typical solutions would involve lab applications associated to it, or sometimes a combination of lab applications. The most common ones we see out there in the market are LIMS platforms. The main ones in the market, the ones that typically people know is about Sample Manager, LabVantage, StarLIMS, BioVia, among others. ELM platforms, some of them are out there like BioVia, ELM Notebook, NuGenesis LMS itself. StarLIMS has a ELM module as well. We have LES, which stands for Laboratory Execution System. And we also have ERP, like one major example out there is SAP. So with all these struggles and all these multiple platforms, they're definitely powerful, but it can offer a lot of functionalities. But there are some challenges that need to be taken into consideration when they are implementing this stuff, right? So for example, one of them is the learning curve for all these platforms. Depending on the platform that you choose, it may require specialized resources with advanced programming skills. Let's say, for example, you're looking for LIMS implementation. Some LIMS have their own specific programming language to it, which sometimes varies from market programming languages, but you need someone skilled on that specific language to work on that platform. Another situation is the investment costs associated to it, right? It varies from business to business. So having people knowledgeable to help you improve your platform as it goes by, that's an investment that you need to do for making this happen. And also the knowledge transfer, right? You can pay for consultants to build the platform for you, but at some point in time, you would most likely look for having internal resources to be able to produce new stuff with your own team and being able to support your own system and walk with your own feet, right? So you have to take it all in consideration when you're implementing a new platform. Another challenge is the software development lifecycle. So how are you going to maintain the software after go live? When you put a system in go live, that's the beginning of the life of that platform within your laboratory, right? So you need to account for being able to maintain a validated state of that informatics platform. Also, integration challenges. How are you going to connect, for example, instruments on your laboratory like balancers, pH meters, osmometers, Carl Fisher, and so on and so on. And also about integrations, you have struggles about application integration. How are you going to connect, for example, your LIMS with your SAP, your MES system with your LIMS? So as you have these multiple platforms across your lab, you may have to deal with multiple APIs from all these different platforms to connect it all together, right? So with that said, let's go a little bit about the benefits of using NuGenesis LMS as a lab management system for you, right? NuGenesis LMS is a platform that has been evolving across the years for people that have been using NuGenesis for many years, and I see a couple of the names here on the audience. I know a couple of you here work with companies that have used NuGenesis for a long time. You know that NuGenesis has been evolving as time goes by, right? NuGenesis has its SGMS module, then it came with an ELN module, and then on top of the ELN module, it started putting a management module. So it kept evolving as time went by, right? So right now, NuGenesis is showing itself as a viable solution depending on the needs of your laboratory, right? So it is a platform worth taking a look at and understanding how it works and see if that's a good fit for your laboratory in maybe working instead of a full LIMS implementation. Maybe NuGenesis LMS will be able to deliver what you need it to deliver, right? So let's go into a couple of the benefits of using NuGenesis. We're going to see a couple of screenshots, some of the screens, so you can get a sense on what NuGenesis can offer to you, and maybe make some evaluation on if this is what you need for your lab in terms of future implementations. So jumping into the sample management capabilities of NuGenesis. So NuGenesis LMS does have a sample management module out of the box, the way it is right now. With this module, you can create requests that you can attribute to departments within your lab, teams or individual members. So you can assign requests to whole departments or to specific teams that you can create within the system. You can add samples, tests, and results to these requests, either using predefined templates to it, or creating ad hoc as seem fit for your purpose. And you can enter results to tests on multiple different methods. For example, you can manually type in the results on your tests. You can do this using electronic lab notebook to record these. You can do via direct connection to instruments like pH, coefficient, balances, osmometers, titrators, you name it, and via integration with external platforms like using NuGenesis connectors or the NuGenesis API. To give you guys one sense of how it looks like, so this is a typical screen of NuGenesis LMS on the My Work tab, which shows you the tabs associated to requests, submissions, samples, and tests. So here's a typical request that I created for the scope of this presentation here. So we have, for example, a request with a unique ID to that request, to a specific product within the system and dedicated to a specific department within NuGenesis. This request having a test associated to it with a test for carbon and nitrogen. This one already has results over it. And if you navigate through this request is associated not only to tests, but also to samples. So as you can see here, for the same request, we have a sample. You can have one or multiple samples. Same thing applies to tests. You can have one or multiple tests associated to this request. And you can have an owner and a department to where this sample is going to. This is the tests window. So in here, for that same request that we were seeing on the previous slide, we have the carbon nitrogen test with the individual results for carbon percentage and nitrogen percentage with their individual values over here, and evaluation that can be done either manually by you or automatically by the system based on specifications that you add to it. In addition to this, you can see also here on your right-hand side, there's a URL associated to this result. This URL connects directly to the NuGenesis SDMS module. So if you have your results being extracted from an SDMS print, for example, you can click on this link, and this is going to bring you straight into SDMS, straight to the report that generated this value of 1.54, for example. Digging a little bit further, if you are on the road of typing in this result manually, this is the way the window looks like if you're typing it in manually. So you can type in the value, you can enter the units, and you can do this evaluation either manually or letting the system do this automatically for you. The list of types of values that you can enter here can be numerics, it can be predefined lists, it can be free text. There are many, many options that you can come over here. So the sample management module is a typical sample management module as you would see on a typical LIMS system with your sample, with requests associated to it, tests and results, specifications that get evaluated as you type in the result. So there are a lot of similarities here between a traditional LIMS system and NuGenesis LMS. Going to other possibilities, you also have chemical and instrument inventories within NuGenesis LMS. So speaking of instruments alone, NuGenesis LMS can help control laboratory instrument inventories by creating an inventory item within a list with controls of instrument IDs, calibration, verification, maintenance dates, due dates for all of these, document templates for maintenance tasks. Let's say you want to have a NeoLAM document that controls your daily verification of your balance. You can have that associated to an instrument equipment on your laboratory. The connectivity information, there are some equipment that can be connected directly to NuGenesis to capture data. So this is the place where you configure that kind of stuff. And you have the ability to log operations associated with instruments, such as calibration, maintenance, verification, actions, activation, deactivation, and test measurements, as you can see in this screenshot here. So this is the instruments page within NuGenesis, and here I had a balance demo created for the purpose of this call here. You can see the instrument ID, the name. It is on an active stage. I had a calibration due date set up in here with building and room location. And at the bottom here, we have a log list on all events that happened for this balance. So with proper configuration and testing, you can think about not having anymore a paper logbook associated to the instrument, and having the users go into a paper logbook and register every instance of a calibration that was done. With proper configuration, you can have NuGenesis capture that for you, like say, for example, this calibration event done over here. The chemical inventory capabilities. So the same thing applies to chemicals and reagents as well. So you can register lot number, supplier, the manufacturing, the expire date, the correct date for your solution, internal lot number, among many, many other fields. And you also have the ability to log operations associated to a chemical. So for example, the booking in of that on the chemical inventory, the deactivation of this, and operations like withdrawing quantities of your chemical. So it looks very similar to the instrument inventory in its look. So for this one here, I created a substance that I call demo chemical with a type of reagent, its location within the lab, the manufacturer, supplier, the lot number, and the internal lot number for this. And here at the bottom, you can see log events that you can associate to this. So for this one was me booking in this chemical to the inventory. The same applies to withdrawals of that. This can be shown up here on this list. So this is one way of controlling the chemical inventory within your laboratory using the same platform that you use for the sample management as well. Other functionalities, we have labels and reports. So for labels and reports, NuGenesis does make use of an application called Jaspersoft Studio to build labels and reports. Those are known as Jasper reports. Jasper Report is a free software, and it is provided along with NuGenesis installation media. So if you open up your NuGenesis installation disks, once you buy it, the Jasper installation module is already in there as a separate application. And its usage, for the ones that are familiar with Crystal reports, typically used on SAP, it's very similar to working with Crystal reports. The good thing is that it doesn't provide, doesn't need high level of coding expertise to working with this. For simpler reports, you can do that without too much of a programming knowledge. Typically, what you would need to do is have a basic understanding of parameters, defining some parameters on NuGenesis that can be passed to the report, and being able to do queries on databases to look for data on NuGenesis, right? Other than that, fairly simple tool to use, not much of a learning curve. I know a couple of folks here on this call had recently been trained on Jaspersoft. And provided that you build your first reports on Jasper, building new reports, you can reuse a lot of the building blocks that you created for one report into another and then expand your capabilities. To bring you guys one example, this one is an out-of-the-box report created with NuGenesis. It comes with the system. So it's a test request report, which is probing for information from that very one request that I was showing on the sample management module. You can see here the carbon nitrogen test, their specific numbers, their evaluation. So this is what it looks like at the user interface level for the typical user. This very same report on Jasper looks like this. So this is the look and feel of Jasper. You have some basic elements that you can add to your reports, like static testing for labeling, text fields that you look for data from your database and you populate this. So if you look here, for example, at the top portion here, you have label user and the username. This translates into the generated by system administrator here in the report. You can align this on the grid, so that gives you the aspect that you look on the final report. So doesn't require too much of a programming knowledge to make this work, even though it looks like terrible here in this window, but it's dragging and dropping the basic elements and configuring that, pointing out to your fields. So that can produce the final report that you want. And the good thing is that it's free. It comes along with NuGenesis. You can install that on your computer and start building your own reports. About specifications, tests, and methods. NuGenesis LMS can have specifications for your products added to it. with several configuration entities. So you can have one specification that contain lots of information under it, like let's say, for example, the product that you have this specification created against. And not only you can have the product, but you can have multiple formulations available for each product. You can have sample templates that you can create and reuse this as you need for other purposes. You can have tests and test groups, and you can have results associated to these tests. And results can also have variants to it. For example, different specifications per market region. Let's say you have a pharmaceutical product that can be sold on North America and Asia. The tests are the same, but the specifications are different. You can create specifications with small variants per market. So specifications window look like this. So for the purposes of this meeting here, I created two specifications in which you can see they are different specifications for the same product. So it's all demo product, but the formulation for these are different. So you can reuse a lot of the configuration that was done for one into another. So for example, pushing the same test for a different specification, but having different limits to it. So you can do a lot of combinations here and have your specifications created beforehand. So when you submit a sample to analysis, all these specifications are already created along with your request and along with your sample before it reaches the lab. Speaking of submissions, how do they come up to your system? So let's speak about sample submission capabilities. There are two ways people can do this. People can use the typical NuGenesis LMS client interface, connect to it, and do everything from the My Work window. But you also have the possibility of using the window that you're seeing in front of you, which is known as Sample Share. Sample Share is a web solution that you can have your users connected to it via a web browser and create requests that then generate samples within the NuGenesis LMS application itself. So people don't necessarily need to have access to the full client application itself. If they are able to open up a browser, they are able to submit samples to NuGenesis. This is helpful not only internally on your lab, but let's say you have external labs submitting samples to you. You can have them submitting the samples before they reach your bench. So you have all the configuration of your sample done beforehand, and you just have the work of accepting the sample. Right? So the sample submission, once you start doing the submission, it looks kind of like this. So you have an initial submission form that people fill with their own information and the information about addresses and so on and so on. On the next page, you select which specification you're submitting samples for today. So you have a specification defined beforehand for a specific product and formulation, and with as many sample templates you need associated to it. Then you can add information about your batch, the number of units you're sending over, the amounts, the location of it, which tests do you require for that one specific sample. So for this one, I'm only having pH associated to it. And then once all of this is done and this is created, then the final result is a request created within NuGenesis LMS, in which the people from the lab will have only the work of receiving that sample, acknowledging it's received, and then all tests and results are going to be already there for them to start working on the sample and then releasing the results afterwards. Okay, so with all of that said, let's talk a little bit about the comparison between the NuGenesis LMS and traditional LIMS. So not everything is birds and flowers when it comes to NuGenesis, right? There are lots of benefits, but there are limitations as well, right? So if you think about comparing NuGenesis LMS versus a traditional LIMS comparison, you would find something like this. So for what we've spoken so far in this presentation here, sample management, chemical inventory, instrument inventory, labels, reporting, and even stability module, NuGenesis does have all of that out of the box. So if you compare this to a traditional LIMS, yes, the capabilities are there and they are fairly similar. And when I say traditional LIMS, I'm doing like an umbrella comparison about the most typical LIMS out there in the market. right? Some of them may be good for one front, some of them may be good for others, but overall, they all have this bare minimum group of managing samples, inventories, labels, and reporting. But when it comes to more specialized things like customized sample workflows, if you compare, for example, NuGenesis against, I don't know, Thermal Sample Manager, the level of granularity that you can have on a sample workflow in Sample Manager is way beyond NuGenesis. At this point in time, NuGenesis doesn't have the capability of creating workflows like if my sample fails a test, it triggers a retesting automatically. NuGenesis doesn't have this capability now. It requires you to do this via procedure or somehow somewhere else. So this is not a capability that NuGenesis does have it today. Same applies for environmental monitoring. So it doesn't tell that NuGenesis couldn't capture environmental monitoring test results, but it doesn't have a typical controlling of all your sensors across the lab and so on and so on. For chain of custody, NuGenesis does have columns to capture the location of a sample, but it's not in the same sense as a typical LIMS does, like pulling reports with who has that sample at every single point in time. It's not readily available in NuGenesis, at least on the latest versions of this. Last but not least, it doesn't apply also to NuGenesis in terms of training and analysis. It is more focused on the work done within the lab. It doesn't have additional functionalities like, again, for example, other typical LIMS out there in the market do have embedded training analysis modules like QC Manager, for example. So it does allow you to do your typical routine work on the lab within NuGenesis LMS, but for more granular items like customizing your workflow or stuff like this, LIMS platforms would still give you more flexibility to be able to do so. But then it comes to the evaluation that I was talking before. Would NuGenesis be enough for what you need right now to put your lab into a more organized, streamlined, and paperless solution? That's a evaluation that you need to do based on your expectations, right? Speaking on integration capabilities, how can you integrate things with NuGenesis? So NuGenesis LMS has a couple of options when it comes to integration. So for example, it can do direct connection to simple instruments like balances, speech meter, Call-Fisher, among others, osmometers, titrators, colorimeters. There are many options out there that can connect directly to NuGenesis. This type of connection is done via Ethernet or RS-32 or with connectors like USB to RS-232. If that equipment has capabilities of connecting and sending data out via RS-232 or other protocols, chances are that you can use NuGenesis to capture that data coming out, parse it, and use the result. Other options are NuGenesis connectors, which is a module provided by Waters that is associated with NuGenesis. And what it does is it uses the printed reports out of SGMS to transfer data over to LMS using parsing. So under connectors, a person running an analysis, let's say in a TGA equipment, would be able to print that report into SGMS, and NuGenesis would automatically transcribe the result from your printing operation directly into an LMS result. And last but not least, we also have via API. So you can integrate NuGenesis with customized integrations with external platforms like ERP, MES, QMS, and Inventory Manager on a traditional API fashion. So to give you some visuals about what I'm talking about, so this is an example of a direct connection to a simple instrument in the lab. So this form here is an ELN form created in NuGenesis LMS for weight measurement. So on the top portion of the protocol, you have a box in which you select the equipment that you're using for weighting. So this one, I selected the balance demo that I had created for this call here. So it pulls up the calibration due date that I had set up on the system and all the information that I can put on the ELN form. And in this field here, once you select this field, it pops up this window that you have over here. So when you have your equipment on your laboratory, you can have your weight put on that balance and click on the print button of the balance. and then the weight that is read from the instrument is directly transcribed into NuGenesis LMS, as you see here, exactly the same number. So this is one example of a direct connection between a simple equipment and a ELN form within NuGenesis LMS. This one happens to be a balance, but the same applies for any other application. Provided that NuGenesis can read the output of that, we can add that to a form. Here's a short example on NuGenesis connectors working in NuGenesis. So for the ones in this call here that already have NuGenesis SGMS, so this is our typical vision web page of SGMS on a print type of report. So as you can see here on the top line, there is this report called print demo being pushed into SGMS with a carbon result of 154 and a nitrogen result of 663. So what NuGenesis does is on the background, once you print this report into NuGenesis, it finds this candidate, extracts this data, parse this number, and pass this along to LMS. So you can see here the carbon and nitrogen results with the exact same numbers as in SGMS. And the URL link here on the right-hand side, if you click on this, this is going to bring you straight into this record here on SGMS and open the report for you. So if you think about this capability here, this can facilitate a lot connecting different systems from different manufacturers into NuGenesis LMS without having to deal with the individual APIs for every single one of the manufacturers, right? You have a centralized solution to parse data and send it over to NuGenesis, which significantly reduces your effort of integrating each and every single instrument on your lab, right? Provided that you have the ability to print something to SGMS, you can potentially connect these and send data over to LMS. And the second good thing about this is that it doesn't require any programming skills at all, because all of these is done through the typical APIs, the typical modules within the system. So for this mapping here, for example, it looks about something like this. Of course, I'm jumping the creation of the print capture templates, extraction templates, but all of those are within the SGMS realm of things. And again, doesn't require programming skills. But when it comes to mapping, so this is the way the mapping is done. So for example, for that carbon result that I was just showing you guys, this is the mapping that it's done. So carbon result, it's pulling results from a table called results. And then, for example, the carbon percent number, the carbon percent name of the test matches with the result ID in LMS. The result within the table carbon content goes into the raw result value. The URL link that you guys were seeing goes to the URL column on that table. So you do a one-to-one matching between what you extracted from the SGMS and where does it go on LMS. Again, all on a user interface that doesn't require programming skills for working on this. Last piece around integration capabilities, you also have the ability to use API to connect NuGenesis with other platforms. So NuGenesis LMS allows for integration with external systems via software development kit. So the NuGenesis SDK, which is a set of development tools that allows programmers to create applications to work along with NuGenesis. For that purpose, Waters provides a reference guide for this with available methods and some simple codes for initial development of your own sorts of programming. The manual is fairly extensive, like 600 pages long. It's available on the Waters portal for you to download with lots of sample codes for this. We were able to work with a couple of our customers about this, mainly around the typical request is to having external platforms like an MES or SAP generating batches for analysis. And then the typical request is to have this request for a batch triggering the creation of a request within the NuGenesis LMS with the specifications needed for that. That's one typical scenario where we see customers reaching us for integrations using the NuGenesis SDK. Well, with all of that said, we have one case study to share with you guys. So this project was completed mid last year here at Asterix. It involved a large chromatography consumables vendor they wanted to streamline their testing processes, integrating the individual reports into the NuGenesis LMS. So not only because of being able to streamline their processes, but they also wanted to use that opportunity as a demo lab of their technical capabilities, right? So their requirement for this was, one, to connect and harmonize multiple instruments from different manufacturers within the NuGenesis LMS. They had multiple balances, multiple TGA instruments, FTIR, chromatography analysis, osmometers. They had multiple different equipments. So they wanted to have all of these into one centralized platform, which would be the NuGenesis LMS. They wanted to have traceability between the results in LMS and their report counterparts in SDMS because they used the electronic signatures within SDMS. So they wanted to be able to easily go from one to another and keep that traceability. They also wanted to connect with their MES platform, so the batches were made available in the NuGenesis LMS automatically. So their MES platform would be the ones who would trigger the creation of new requests within the NuGenesis. And last but not least, create reports for result reporting and also KPI extraction. So for all of this to happen, planning is key, right? So the first things that we needed to do is, with all this sort of different equipments with different formats and different reporting coming from everywhere, we needed to set an agreement on the minimal information needed for each data source so it can be harmonized across multiple platforms, right? Followed by that, we created print capture templates and extraction templates to parse and extract data. So for example, one of the requests was, I want to be able to pass to LMS who did the printing of the result and when that was done. So the part of this harmonization was to add this type of field to the SDMS print capture and then migrate that into LMS. So by doing this conversation beforehand, we were able to have multiple different vendors harmonized under the same templates. We also aligned the naming conventions for testing and specifications to minimizing mapping efforts. So if a carbon percentage test comes through, it will always be carbon space percent. So my mapping becomes way easier to maintain afterwards. Specifications were loaded into LMS using a customized tool. In this case, it was ELM forms designed to load specifications directly into the database. And the reports were harmonized for leveraging of building blocks in Jasper. Once all of this planning is done, after the execution of all of these was completed, the final benefit that this company had was 12 individual techniques added to SDMS capture and extraction with the instrument outputs from different vendors harmonized. So it doesn't matter if it's a Sartorius balance or a Mettler-Toledo balance, it works the same. And it's one parsing for both. The mapping of tests and results from SDMS to LIMS created for all 12 individual techniques. So once we harmonize the data coming into SDMS, so then my mapping work into LMS is way easier because I already did the harmonization. Specifications were loaded into LMS using customized tools in which the naming convention was aligned with extracted values. And the reports were created for both results reporting and generation of general information. So we had a preliminary COA, which was printed and then sent over to people to work on the QMS system and generate the official COA. The reason for that is because the company had marketing materials that went along with the COA. So to make things a little bit easier to maintain, so we didn't incorporate marketing stuff into the lab application. We left that outside. So we provided a preliminary COA with all the information required. They had the additional work of adding the marketing material on top of that. And there were a couple of general information reports that were created using Jasper. So we had, for example, release sample reports, retest logs, submission reports, test reports, and first pass quality reports, all of them with different querying, looking for a specific type of data. So how many retests did I do? What was the most common retesting done in the lab? And so on to help them do the analysis afterwards on what was done. So the key takeaways of this webinar here So we provided you guys some insights into the benefits of using NuGenesis LMS as a sample management system. Let you guys understand the benefits of using NuGenesis LMS, discuss the similarities and differences between NuGenesis LMS and a traditional LIMS system. And you guys heard about a case study of a NuGenesis LMS implementation. So that's it I had for you guys today. Kevin, I guess you're the next one.
Yeah, we'll jump back on. A couple of things here before we wrap up the recording portion of this. I want to encourage everybody to, when you receive the follow-up email, please go out and check out our YouTube channel. There's a lot of great content on there, similar to what you saw today, covering lots of different vendors like NuGenesis and lots of different elements within the lab informatics and R&D space. If there's immediate questions, if you want to reach out and contact us about possibly working with our team and someone like Marcelo, you could reach directly out to a gentleman by the name of Michael Zakowski up on the screen. His email's there, mzakowski@Asterix Inc. On the Asterix website, there's contact us pretty much on every page, so you can always just hit the contact us, reach out, and a team member will get back to you right away to answer any questions you have. So with that, let's go ahead and do a couple things here. I want to get the recording stopped.